Shyam, you can start.
Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to Tamil Heritage Trust's monthly heritage talk. On behalf of Tamil Heritage Trust, I'm delighted to wish you all a wonderful new year in 2023, and I hope we will see you at all our events and programs this year as well. Thank you for your support all of last year, and we hope to have another great year together this year. As always, we begin with a very quick introduction to Tamil Heritage Trust, or THT as we are known. THT was set up back in 2010 with the objectives of understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating India's rich and varied heritage. And towards this, we conduct a series of programs, the most popular one being this monthly heritage talk. In fact, we now have two monthly heritage talks. The online talks, which are in English, are held on the first Saturday of every month, like this one today. And we have now started having an in-person talk as well. We resumed the in-person talks in Chennai, which is held on the third Saturdays of every month, and they are in Tamil. Apart from that, we have an annual in-person Pechi Kacheri to coincide with the Kacheri season here in Chennai in December. We just concluded a very successful Pechi Kacheri on the topic of Vijayanagara, the city, a dynasty, and an empire. We had 10 lectures by scholars, which were well received. And if you've missed them, you can watch them on our YouTube channel as well. We conduct an Indology festival, which is a week-long festival of talks and seminars. The most recent one was in June of 2022, when we talked of temple builders of medieval India during the period of 8th to 13th century CE. Now, all our talks, the monthly talks, the sites, the Indology festival, the Pechi Kacheri, all of them are available free for you to watch at any time in our YouTube channel, Tamil Heritage Trust YouTube channel. And please, we will welcome you to subscribe to the channel as well as click on the bell icon so that you don't have to miss any of our events and programs. We also conduct workshops here in Chennai, how to see a temple, how to see a museum, scripts like Pallava Grantha and so on, as well as a site seminar where we visit monuments and sites of importance, of heritage importance in the country, with a view to studying them in detail. We have an initiative for teachers to take out the word on heritage to students as well as their local communities. We call it Alavaravai, Teachers for Heritage. This year onwards, we've been retained with the family of Shri V. Venkaya, who was India's the first Indian chief epigraphist for the country. And his family has retained us to administer and give away the V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award. And we are delighted that the first one award was won by Dr. Y. Subbarayalu, picked by an eminent panel, jury panel. We also give away the THT Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award. It's named after our co-founder, Professor Swaminathan. As you can see, he's been giving away the award last year in 2022. The award was won by Shri Prateek Chakravarti. To join our mailing list and make sure that you don't miss any of our events, please send us a mail to admin@tamilheritage.in, and we will ensure that you receive information on time for all our events. Coming to today's, the first talk of the year 2023, and we are delighted to have, I think, probably the youngest speaker Tamil Heritage Trust has had in recent memory, Prateek Pattanaik, and we'd like to welcome him to the show. A brief introduction on Prateek. Prateek is an Odissi musician as well as a speaker and writer on Odia culture and music. He has a master's in Odia and in physics. And his interest in heritage started very early. When he was still in 9th standard, the Jagannath Temple of Koraput made an exhibition of a PowerPoint presentation that he had made on the Sri Jagannath cult in Odisha. Since then, he has not looked back. He's worked on several research and documentation projects to showcase, to document vulnerable cultural practices, including performing arts, musical traditions, less well-known monuments, neglected languages, palm leaf manuscripts, and a lot. to preserve them for the future. He's a trained musician, a vocalist, and a binakara, and a disciple of Pandit Guru Ramarao Patro. And he collects and learns rare songs, tunes, and ragas and techniques, and documents them in what he calls the Odissi project, about which we'll hear in detail in today's talk. He's assisted in a documentary on the Bolda language for National Geographic. He was recognized by none other than the Chief Minister of Odisha, Shri Prateek Pattanaik ji, who had not only met him and felicitated him, but also tweeted about him, saying at that time he was only 18, but his passion for Odisha's culture and heritage, his dedicated work, document and revive our dying art forms, transcends boundaries of age. Delighted to meet the inspiring at Prateek. Congratulated him on his sterling efforts and assured support in his endeavors. He had tweeted. He's also one of the youngest Wikisors on the Odia Wikisource. So we're really delighted to have Prateek Pattanaik as the first speaker of 2023. Please welcome Prateek Pattanaik. Over to you, Prateek.
Namaste. That was quite an introduction. Thank you for your kindness. I'll begin, I think, I have a few clips and snippets of what I have been able to collect over the years. This has started out as an individual exercise, and I don't think this will be called a professional documentation, but I've tried to do what I could do. Should I go ahead with the talk?
Yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sure. So, namaste to everyone watching. This talk is meant to be about the documentation efforts that I've tried to do on a very personal level here in Odisha, which is a place, Odisha as a state is very rich in its history, and both intangible elements of history like temples and murals, and intangible elements like songs, performing arts, dances, etc. It is peculiar for its blend of both the tribal and primitive aspects of culture, as well as a very classical, refined culture, and both are coexisting. So which makes research and documentation all the more difficult, because it is difficult for a single person to have command on both of these aspects. So that itself makes it very difficult to document these two aspects, which are almost polar opposites, on a very deep level. If you're talking about documenting it at a level where it will be referred to as almost a single reference of sorts, so you don't even have a single reference available for each of the things that are found across the state. For example, there are over 2-3 dozen tribes, and each have their own language and therefore their own specialized songs and methods of singing and types of dance, and you just can't get into their culture unless you're acquainted with their language. Apart from that, the Odia language is of course the most prominent language. It's most widely spoken, but of course the Odia language also has its roots in these tribal languages, many of which are yet to be studied seriously by the linguists. A few have, many of them have not been. So from the very beginning, I am quite focused on what I am documenting. My specialization lies in ancient and medieval classical Odia literature and music. And we find this fluidity between the classical and the folk in our state. Therefore, you can expect even folk songs to have remnants of the classical, and the classical elements utilizing folk elements and making them into ragas and all that. Therefore, there's a certain degree of flexibility between those two aspects. I try to stay within that range is my first ground rule, which I've laid for myself, that I do not venture into documenting things that I'm not deep enough about. So within that, my primary focus is South Odisha. That is where I hail from, the local dialect of which I'm more familiar with, and most importantly, the lifestyle of the people, as in what they eat and how they live, and what is the economic condition, and what is the socio-economic structure in which I'm working, so that I do not venture into areas in which I'm not clear about. So that I focus on South Odisha. Within South Odisha, it so happens that there are some 50 performing art forms still alive as of now that we are speaking. So of these 50 forms, most are rooted in music. As I say music, I refer to classical Odissi music, which is what we told in the beginning. I'm a student of Odissi classical music, which is the traditional classical music of the Jagannath temple of Puri. So therefore, I tend to be attracted to rare songs and ragas that are surviving in the villages. Therefore, I focus on these performing art forms that are more tilted towards the musical aspect rather than dance heavy or abhinaya heavy forms. Of these, I've been documenting on a very, what do I say? I started this thing of documentation with very unprofessionally recording artists who came by my home. Here we have a custom of yogis or nath yogis walking by playing their veena, which is called a contola veena or a kendera. So it's like a lute, it's a small lute made of coconut shell, which they play and walk from home to home. So that is where it struck me that I've never seen something like this, and I must take out my mobile and record it. Since then, I've tried to improve it with a camera and learning more about how to make it in a better quality in 4K, how to do the sound. I try to do everything on my own because I don't have the support system required for editing or to allow somebody else to edit. Also bit of a control freak, so I try to do the editing and the post production part also by myself. There is a reason why I do that. The reason being that these areas are so specialized that a secondary editor or somebody not from the zone will not understand what is being edited and why it is being edited and how to structure it, which is a problem I often face with the older generation because they do not say the history in a proper order. They will tell it in a different order and I have to restructure it for it to make sense because they tell it in whatever order it comes to them. I will show a few clips in order to illustrate what I do. Basically, I go to these gurus of performing art forms deep in the villages of South Odisha, which consist of the districts of Ganjam, Koraput, and Raigada, Malkangiri, parts of Nabarangpur, parts of Kandhamar, parts of Nayagad. And I also work with some artists in the Khordha, Puri, Jagatsinghpur region. But most of my contacts happen to be from the Ganjam district, which consisted of some 10-15 princely states before the formation of the state. So each of those princely state areas have to be dealt with separately because the princely states were on a competition mode in the 18th, 19th century, even as early as the 17th century. They were on a serious competition mode, which led to a mushrooming of various art forms, most of them being Leelas or retellings of Krishna's Bhagavata or Ramayana or Mahabharata, which happens not to be too popular. So Ramalila, Krishna Lila mainly. And they are written by a variety of authors. So Krishna Lila or Krishna Lila doesn't refer to a single text, refers to some 10-20 texts written by 10-20 poets in each of the pockets of the district. And each of them have been separately composed with different performing dynamics. So one might be music heavy. So there's only music, there's no percussion even in one kind of a Ramalila. There's another Ramalila which focuses more on the dance. So music is just a secondary accompaniment. There are some other forms which are more mimetic in their aspect. So there's a song being sung and they enact it instead of dance to it. There are others which completely do away with the music aspect and limit them to a repeated looped instrumental tune like the Sahijata of Puri, which is said to date back to 11th, 12th centuries in the very least. So I'll show a clip of I have started doing this because I saw the gurus of these villages not being recorded by a single other person. I've not seen them being interviewed on the All India radio. I've not seen their interviews on Doordarshan or any online media. I don't think there is a second interview of many of these people. So here is a 105-year-old person, Guru Gopinatha Swai, from the village of Gobindapur in Ganjam, singing Krishna Leela, and he's singing a raga native to Odisha called Kumbha Kamodi. I hope this goes through.
You've not yet shared anything.
I'm sharing. He's 105, so he's probably the oldest person, oldest traditional guru alive.
আরে মোরো গলা রে বুড়াইলো ভেড়া পিণ্ড রাখি কেহু পরাণ নেলা মোকামতি
So that was Guru Gopinath Swami. It makes me utterly sad. He received the Odisha Sangeet Natak Academy Award just the last month. Makes me very sad to think that not even a single video clip of these people, these great gurus have been made. And if at all they've been made, they're not available in the public domain, which is a big problem in states like Odisha. I presume the condition in Tamil Nadu is much better because there's a greater number of people working. We are more aware of your heritage and more people are working proactively in that direction. Unfortunately, that is not the case with all of Odisha. It's not as well connected as it would be in other states. And there are not as many people willing to do this. There's no interest from the state government in covering art forms that are quite away from the capital region. For the art forms that are close to the capital region, for example, the Devadasis of Puri, they have been much documented because of the revival of Odissi dance. However, the profusion in which these art forms exist within the pockets of parts that are distant from the capital is yet to be. There's not even a proper list of the art forms that are there some 500 kilometers away from the state capital. So the work is not just to learn from the locals, but what are the art forms at all that exist in Odisha or exist in your part of Odisha. The thing is also to find a person who is still alive and can also sing and is willing to sing and to come in front of the camera. And that also happens to vary, which is why I usually have adopted a method of these gurus. As you know, anybody walks to them, they won't tell. So they are very choosy and particular because of their because this was their profession in one point of time in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, even until the 80s and 90s. These songs were so sacred and so useful to them that when they traveled to villages, the villages would test them on this acumen that do you know this song? And they would ask that to two gurus. Each of these art forms has some 600-700 songs and some 50, 60 ragas. So they would ask, sing this song, and if one of the two gurus is able to tell that, then he would be the chosen one. Because of that tendency, there is a tendency not to reveal the song to anybody who comes by, because they think he wants the song, he'll take the song and then he has no work with it. So all these kinds of things makes it very difficult to tell them, to make them understand what documentation even is in the first place, which is also an interesting clip I'll show you in the end. A very confused guru who cooperated with us all the way, and at the end asked, what are you even going to do with this recording of me speaking in jumbled phrases? I don't think this is going to be any use, is what he said. I also tried to, while doing all this, there's also the aspect that the people I'm dealing with are primarily born sometime between the 1930s to the 1950s. So I try to cover the older people first. But then we can only do so much. This is really, it needs a host of dozens of people working this at the same time in order to even cover something significant from one person, leave alone many persons who constitute an entire tradition. What you heard was the Krishna Leela of Dukhi Syamadasa of Athagada in Ganjam. And this was how it was sung by the 1940 born generation. The way it is sung by the 1950 born generation is somewhat simpler. It's still not very simple, but it's simpler than what he sung. So it's almost a peek into the past of the developmental history of an art form and how it has become corrupted and deviated due to changing needs of the changing demands of the audience, or the change scenario where the audience demands that sing something modern, or audience can't bear to hear something this complex because of television and other media, as everybody knows. The other challenge is there is no proper historical documentation of where all these forms have been created. So who is the original creator? If you know who is the creator, then what is the text that they sing? If there's a text, has it been published? Is there a critical edition? Is there a text which you can refer to? Because if I know this guru sings Dukhi Shyam Das's Krishna Lila, which has some 400 or 500 songs. Now, when he is singing, I don't have a text to refer to. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to ask him for his copy or his notebook. Once he gives me his notebook, only then do I have the right to ask, sing this song and sing this raga, because I don't have the whole day to sit with him. I can't sit with him for a month. He won't allow me to sit with him for more than 4 or 5 hours. I try to get maximum value in that duration, and so I have to take a notebook and I have to ask, do you know this lost raga? And in that process, I have come across so many esoteric raga names that I never suspected would have been extant in 2022. I thought these things are long gone from the 1950s, 60s. But to my utter surprise, I came across names like Todi Bhattiyari, Chinta Hari, Kalahangsa Kedaro, and all these raga names, which I have seen in palm leaf manuscripts and in printed critical published texts of the 16th, 17th centuries. I know from my reading that these are the ragas that were most popular. This was most popular in 1750 and was used in this region by this poet who revived it. But it's very difficult to find an original composition. And that is another aspect of what I do. So in Odisha, as in everywhere else, you have songs. Because these are classical songs, you have the raga and tala delineated by the poet, who is the Vaggayakara or the composer as well. Now, when you collect a song, you have to cross-check it with that indication, which is what we call the nirdesha of the poet. To check it with the nirdesha of the poet. Is it matching? If it is matching, then you can understand then that it is from the correctly passed down tradition from the poet himself. And now that happens within a fixed geographical region mostly, but there are examples of deviations from that. So now you not only have to collect a song, but you have this added challenge of getting it in the raga and tala of the poet himself. And this gets very difficult even when the poet is only some 150, 200 years old, because there's a profusion. The poets of Odisha allowed their compositions to be recomposed by fellow composers. This was a system that existed because there were people who were solely composers and not poets, who were not equipped to create the dhatu or the sahitya and could only create the matu or the music portion. The dhatu matu nomenclature is reverse in Odisha as compared to other regions. So for the freedom of the composers, the poets allowed their compositions to be recomposed. Now what has happened in several scenarios is that the recomposed version caught on, and hence the original composition of the poet has died down, which is a great loss actually, because we could have got a glimpse, a peek into the mind of a great poet, which we have lost. Now, the good part is, as compositions spread out, what happens is one version catches on and gets practiced by the majority of musicians across the state. So some 60-70% will be singing that version. And they will be utterly clueless about this village deep in the interior of some remote part of Odisha. There will be one guru who has not performed for 20-30 years, and that guy will know the tune that I'm searching for, which is the poet's original indication. And there you get a glimpse of something that has survived away because there is simply no economy that mandates the evolution or the development or the changing, morphing of these forms. That is surprisingly how I've come across many things. And also that brings about the aspect of what has already been recorded. A lot of independent researchers and professors from both India and outside India have come to Odisha from the 1970s, 80s and have done recordings in a period when not much of Odisha's culture has been recorded on video, simply because the camera was not as easy to access then here by the professors of the state, because of the poor economy. And nor did the government do so. In the cases where the government has done that, the tapes are not preserved. Very few are. So I also try to work with people who have that and to help them recover and digitize and clean it of noise and put it on YouTube for the world to see. So in the 1980s, Professor John Emmy of the Rhode Island, America, came and studied the Prahalada Nataka tradition of Ganjam for a long period, for almost a decade or two. And he continued his research in successive trips to Odisha. And he did some recordings of the Raja or the Hiranyakashipu. The Prahalada Nataka is a form written sometime around the 1870, 80 or so by the king of Jalantara, which was an Odia princely state, which is now being merged into, not now, during the state formation, merged into Andhra. So now the demography of that place is changing in a very rapid rate. And fortunately, the art form that was made during the 1870s, that has survived because it is caught on in parts of South Odisha. It is hugely caught on. Now this art form, Prahalada Nataka, has got a lot of popularity, which inevitably means a lot of practicing people, which is good for the form because it survives, but also bad because there's too many people and there's too much economy. So therefore it's getting not as good as it used to be. So there's a clip of certain lost ragas and moves and dance abhinayas, a whole package, which is recorded during the 80s and 82s. And this is with an introduction from the professor himself, Professor John Emmy's clip of Prahalada Nataka from the 80-82 from Ganjam.
My name is John Amy. I'm a theater director and scholar from the United States. And this is a series of films made in 1982 and 83 showing the use of puppets and masks up and down the eastern coast of India. The footage you'll see in the next half hour concentrates on the image of Narasimha and the story of his emerging from a pillar in order to save Prahlada from the terrible punishments meted out by his demon father Hiranyakashipu. I want to connect this figure of Narasimha with the history of Shakti masks and figures as used in performances in this eastern coast of India up and down the coast.
This consists of footage from outside Odisha as well. So I'll forward to the part which covers Prahalada Nataka that I mentioned.
नाना सुगंधि सुवासित ओम गंभीर महाविष्णु दरंदम सर्वतोमुखम सिंहम विष्णुभद्रम मूर्तिमूर्तिम भूरोस्पलक्ष्मी सिंहाय आत्मनिमः आत्मन्यमुद्राय गंगं गंभीरं महाविष्णु दरंदम सर्वतोमुखम सिंहम विष्णुभद्रम मूर्तिमूर्तिममान्यं भूर्भस्वाहा नम भगवती ओम भासुराय लक्ष्मी सिंहाय महाविष्णुये सिंहाय ताम्बूलं समर्पयामि नमः ताम्बूलं
Hiranyakashipu of the Prahlada Nataka in this very unusual attire. So that was a small clip from Professor John Emmy's documentation. Again, these things that have been recorded are not even being preserved well. Many of these tapes are with the individuals who recorded them, who have no clue how to put this online and are interested. So this is one more aspect of what we cannot record, but at least we can help preserve. Another thing that I do in my works is try to make a reconstruction of the Guru tradition, which has led to the evolution of these forms, because some of these forms are born in 1850s or 1860s. So we have the fifth or sixth generation of disciples alive who still have a fairer knowledge of their ancestors and 3-4 of their ancestors, of their gurus, 3-4 generations earlier, which is the information that we can't find later. So I make it a point to keep asking about the gurus that were there before them. Also, as I was talking about the notebooks, I might as well show a few notebooks belonging to the early 1880s, 1890s and so, which would be very apparent from the style of writing. So this is how music notebooks used to be, the 1890s and all. These are dialogues for the same Prahlada Nataka, a different version of it. And here you have songs written all over. For example, here it says Gita, Raga, Paraja, Tala, Rupaka. And most of these songs are extinct now. However, some 50% or some of it survives. I also work I also happen to find some notebooks that have lost the performing aspect totally. So these are just texts that have no successor performing tradition. These are lost texts. This is how I have just made it into a PDF and all. This also mentions ragas and everything, and Mandakranta, Ananda Bhairavi, etc. So these notebooks are also at a high risk, and they have also not been documented because we are too obsessed with documenting what is too old, and we ignore stuff that is from the post 1800s. Also, after the 1800s, there were several number of people in the villages who had still not come out of the mindset of the 18th century. So these are the notebooks of those people. There were such people in Odisha even until 1940s who kept writing in palm leaf manuscripts. And palm leaf manuscript documentation is something that has not been done at all in our state. And it has been done only by the Odisha State Museum under the National Mission for Manuscripts, but there are no individual projects. There have been no proper even catalogs of the collections that lie with the various monasteries and mathas and temples across the state. So I've tried doing a few palm leaf manuscripts on my own. So this is a sample of that. This is the Kular Navatantra. And these are done using a fairly good camera, and you can read it, which is the point. And there are many texts of ancient Odia language as well as Sanskrit agamas and all lying in the villages, which have not been at all catalogued, as I said. On my trips, I happened to come across several mural and temple sites on which I just do a photograph. I photograph it completely with a map and all. I do a systematic photography, but my major work lies in the intangible art forms, not in the tangible ones. Even so, I've come across quite a few precious things, such as this, such as these murals of Buguda, which are quite well known. Huge temple full of murals, not documented by the government, not available. Tomorrow they might be washed away and nobody would have photographs available for the public access. And similarly, these are the paintings of the 18th century poet Jadumani Mahapatra, which are in his ancestral home. And so surprisingly, nobody is aware of their existence. They've not been written about by the academia, nor does the government know. They are not in the museums. The museums themselves have a lot of collections that are not on display and are not available to the public at all. The Odisha State Museum is the one to take some steps in this direction. Hopefully, there will be better days in the future. And another of my works is, obviously, I can't record everything, but at least I can learn. So the gurus, typically when I ask these 80, 90, 100-year-old gurus about their gurus and about the songs that their gurus used to sing and about the difference in the performance dynamic of the 1950s, 60s and present, they're very articulate about that. Unfortunately, I can't ask them to sing all of 600. I can in a day ask only some 30 songs or so. So I can't ask them to sing all of them on record. So I put a mic and I just ask them to hum along, which is how I've been able to record at least some memory of those songs. They're not totally lost. And you saw in the Prahalada Nataka video, a guru holding Prahalada on his arms and singing loudly. That was Guru Simanchara Patra, an award-winning performer of the Hiranyakashyapa role in the Prahalada Nataka. And now he is at least he's some above 90, he's 92 or so. He's forgetful of his own age. And we arranged a whole session with him so he could sing. And this is a small preview of how he performed that day. The sound of the wind instrument that you hear is the Mukhabina. It is played by Guru Harinatha, who also has passed away since the recording of this video. These are unedited clips I'm showing you just for the sake of showing the environment in which all this was recorded. He was shivering, as we can see in a side shot. So to be able to record a guru like this with 3 generations of his disciples, and most of them are unfortunately not privileged enough to be covered very much on this video media. So I try to do as much recording of them as I can do, because typically I get to spend only 2-3 days with each of them. Been able to until now do interviews of some 50-60 gurus, I think. And I'll show just 1 or 2 more clips of people who are no longer around. And interviews last probably 1 hour, 2 hours, because that's probably the only video of them that will be available in the future. So I'll just show Guru Simanchada Mandala of Radha Prema Leela, which I did an experiment. I asked him to sing a song and I played his own voice for him to enact along with in the Abhinaya. This is Abhinaya that a child of the ages 10 to 20 would do typically in the Leela. The Abhinaya has been simplified to be suitable to the expressions of a small child, but it's being done by a man around 75-80. It's his own voice. So typically when I put these on YouTube, I would subtitle it properly in both Odia and English. It would be better for you to watch it there. I'll end it with a clip of Guru Arjuna. The Guru I showed you last, Guru Simanchada Mandal, is no more, so in his late memory. I'll end with a clip of Guru Arjuna Adhikari, who is 103, also a Guru of Prahalada Nataka. We finished the whole interview. I typically tend to not be too formal when talking with them when the camera is on, because that makes them afraid and it changes the whole tone and way of talking. I'm more interested in capturing how they speak in the day-to-day life and the switch between the performer and the regular guy. So the moment he thought the camera was off, he asked, what is this you're going to do with this? And he showed the camera and he said, I'm mumbling, I'm not able to speak and I'm getting out of breath. What are you even going to do with this? Because he thinks he didn't sing well, therefore it's useless what he did. And he very innocently asked about the camera. So I think you will get the emotion, if not the language.
ହେଲା ସେଟା ତ ଆମର ଯୁଆଡ଼େ ଗଲେ ଗୀତ
ନାଇଁ ମୁଁ ବୋଇଲେ ଭଲ ଲାଗୁଛି କରୁଛି ମତେ ବୋଇଲେ ଲାଗୁଛି ଶୋଷା ଲାଗୁଛି ହେଲେ ସ୍ୱର ରହୁନି ସ୍ୱର କୁଆଡ଼େ ହେଉଛି ବନ୍ଦ ହେଇଯାଉଛି
ହଉ ରଖେ
ଆଗକୁ ବୋଲ
So even that, just the way they talk and the dialect, the colloquial musical language that they've acquired from the previous generation is something that needs to be recorded, will be studied by someone, if not now, then in the future. As I said, all my work is very focused on music, because I'm not equipped enough to work on the dance aspect. In that aspect, I'm very focused on what I do. I try to record as much as I can, so somebody in the future will perhaps look at the tapes and be able to see something that I didn't. And in all this, I would be ungrateful if I didn't acknowledge the help of a few people that have always helped me in getting to the places, and the logistics, and just the support of everybody being together, and multiple multi-angle shots, planning these things, which is Devendra Patnaik sir, Arjun Samantrai, and Shekhar Suman Maji, who have helped me in all these trips. I keep counting on their information to get to the villages and asking other gurus where other gurus are. And this is a lifelong task. I don't think it will ever be over, but at least one can do what one can do. So thanks. I think I'll end it here. You're muted, sir.
Prateek, are you done with your presentation?
I think you should.
Okay. I'll just have, we'll have a brief conversation, maybe about, 10-15 minutes, because this is, what you are doing is an extremely difficult activity. I understand that, right? Typically, this is something that has to be done by, large universities, well-funded, etc. But this is the case in most of India, right? It's not just for Odisha; it's for other states as well. There is so much to document. Things are vanishing, especially art forms like this, because they are so dependent on performers, and performers are mortals, and their own children are not taking on to this. Now, that is the bleaker form, part of it for us to talk about. But for a minute, I don't want to do that. I want to rather celebrate this, right? So first question to you is, how do you know what is out there to be documented first?
Exactly. As I was saying, there's no proper catalog. There's no list
Right.
of these are the art forms that you have to cover, and this is what existed. In many cases, I have come across people saying that this is there, you should go there. And then when I go and search around for 12 villages,
Right.
I learn that the form has died by the time I'm there. That has happened. That has happened. I have been to one village, for example, there was a Ramalila of Chikiti. Chikiti is a place in South Odisha. It's a princely state. The king of Chikiti had written a Ramalila that became viral across the state.
Okay.
It was so classical that it was so complex, the singing, and so slow that there's no percussion, because percussion can't keep up with it. There's no dance whatsoever. It's only singing. So I had documentation from 1983, which was published just 4 months ago. So I saw and I knew about it, but I didn't know which villages. So I first found a list made in 1980. That's the only documentation anybody has made of it. So I took that list. That list said, had some 10 villages. It said this village has 8 people, that village has 5 people, like that. I went to all 10 one by one. In 9 of them, they said, no, this is not there. No, we have not seen this. Are you sure it's our village? Because we don't think it's our village. And then they said, let me ask my father. Father says, no, grandpa used to say that there was something. We don't know exactly what. And then one old guy comes along from the pan shop and says, hey, yes, you ask the pujari will know. Then the pujari says, see, we don't know, but go to the 4 villages after our village. There's a village where there's a temple. In that temple, there's a notebook which is worshipped. That notebook should be there. So you get the notebook, even if you can't find the song. So I go to the notebook and we find that notebook is not of the form we are searching. It's some other form. But that guy says, no, I know what you're talking about. Go there, perhaps you'll find the percussionist of the form, not the singer. So I go to the percussionist. The percussionist says, no, I'm not the percussionist. I'm the guy who was trusted with opening the manuscript before the singing. So the manuscript has to be opened, and there's a guy who's just there to open the manuscript and read along. So he's the one who is the holder of the manuscript.
Okay.
So that guy says, no, I know what you're talking about. Go to that Krishna Lila Guru. He'll know where the Rama Lila Guru is. I went to the Krishna Lila Guru, and these people are playing cards on his balcony. And these cards guy go, wait, we'll call him. And they call him, and he says, go to that. At 3 p.m. I reach the house of that one person. He's the last person of that form. He's the last person of that form. Just like my guru, Pandit Ramarao Patra, is the last practicing Veena player of the Odisha school. The last. He's the single.
Okay.
So now I reach that Ramalila Guru 3 p.m. Now he's like, I have had my lunch. Can't sing Ramalila. My entrails will come out, is what he said, literally.
Okay.
So now we have to coax him, and then he does his old test of, do you know ragas, or are you here just for fun, to make fun of me? He's surprised you've come all this way searching just for my Ramalila.
Right.
And then he cooperates, and he wants to tell us so much that you have that suppressed for some 20 years is not performed. Now somebody comes along asking that, no, we want your version of the Ramalila. We don't want the other ones. We know yours is the good one. And now he just won't let go of us. He made us sit for 5:30, and then we had to leave, saying, no, sir, it will get dark. We have to leave, and we'll come one more day. And now the expectations of that old man, he doesn't have a mobile. He wants to see. And he's like, what have you done to my recording? Please come, please show me. And he's too excited. So some 50 gurus are waiting for me to go to their village and show me on my iPad.
Did you do that? Did you show? And what happened?
I'm going one by one. You saw that last guru, na? You're taking this on camera. What will happen, yaar? He literally said that.
Okay.
I can't sing. You didn't come when I was of my age. Right? I was not born, sir. So that is how vulnerable and how simple.
I understand. But I now see the layers involved in this, right? First, there is a text created by somebody. Right?
Yes.
It's not just a plain text or a poem.
It's a performative text.
Musically, right? It is meant for performance. Therefore, there is a musical notation to it.
Yes.
But perhaps it was not, the practice is not to write a musical notation, because in our tradition, there is no musical notation form.
Right? Nowhere in India that written.
Right. So it is written, it must have, I'm just going back in time. It was written, performed by, or not performed in the sense that it was a performance, but it was between the writer and the performer of how this is how it should be performed. This is where emphasis should be given. This is the raga you should use. Yes. So there must have been some back and forth, right? Then versions of it, note taking might have happened because you have to pass it on.
Yes.
And then from what you say, I understand that there is a ritual part to it.
Obviously.
Right? When you say it's not just writing, singing, and performing, when you say somebody is the opener of the notebook, that means it's ritual. Yeah, an opener of the manuscript, which means it is a clear role given to individuals. There is somebody who opens it, puja. The whole thing is worship.
No, I have had that. I've gone to villages and met the people, and they're saying, we can't open the book today. Come on that Tithi. And that's also.
So my God, I mean, no, I suddenly see that there are layers in this where how are we even going to document it? This much of history is built into it. It is not a Ramalila. It is not a Krishna Lila, which for us, there are million versions available in India, right? It's been written. It is from your Valmiki and Vyasa onwards. There are million versions that are available. But this is a specific version with so much of ritualistic, local cultural context packed into this, and we are going to lose it.
That's the tragedy. That's the tragedy, because from a very, very early age, I was exposed to books that were very early printed books, 1850
Right.
printed books in our
Right.
local Koraput library.
Okay.
And I used to sing even then. In those books, I found song lyrics of gramophone records of the 1930s. There's one gentleman who has made a channel, and he is on his own. He has been able to collect, digitize, and put some zillions of Odia gramophone recordings for free. And of course, all the early ones are classical Odissi music, of course, because there was no other music in the 1930s. So I began to find those texts in the books of the 1880s. When I found more and more texts, I was like, what is the point of this being in the printed form? This is in the printed form, it is sapless, it doesn't have rasa. Unless
Right.
you go to the
Right.
village,
Right. You're right.
unless you go to the village and you listen to it.
Mhm.
And then initially I was very skeptical. I thought this can't survive. If this was surviving, then
Right.
somebody must have written about it, no?
Correct.
Somebody
Correct.
should have put, they should have been everywhere if this. Then you see in one district, if you have 30, 40 performing art forms, then who is to document it? We need local stakeholders who are interested in doing that.
Absolutely. That brings me to the next question, right? Now, for a minute, let's again, let us leave the doom and gloom. Let's look at what could possibly happen, at least
Sure.
what in science we call as thought experiments, right? Supposing I give you unlimited money, unlimited, right? You want $100 billion, let's say I give you $100 million, right? And you can somehow crowdsource people who are interested in this, right? Do you think it can be like this army can be trained to go massively and then start documenting it in video form?
I've been constantly urging people, if you have a temple or if you have sculpture or murals, bronzes in the temple nearby you, please click photos. That's the least you can do. It doesn't take any time, any money, any effort. Because in many of the places I have photographed something and bronze goes missing next day,
Right.
stolen by some international somebody.
Absolutely.
That happens. Intangible, as you said, intangible is the most vulnerable. As the person dies, a legacy of some 350 years, 400 years, 500 years dies with that sole last stakeholder of that art form. So minimum people can do is record, and nowadays thankfully we have good quality recording. I've been urging people to do this. Interestingly, I found positive feedback, because Twitter, the Odia community is very active, and
Right.
now when something happens in any village, I will be the first one to get tagged. People keep tagging me, see this Leela is going on in our village, why don't you come? People have invited me to their villages. We'll take care of your stay, we'll feed you, you properly come and stay in our house, because our village, we want our village to be documented.
Right.
So, people have that. And the bigger question is, because this is a very specialized discipline, music is a very specialized discipline. Now somebody has to do the notation.
Yeah.
Now you can't train people to do the notation. I'll have to do the notation myself, but at least they can record it.
Correct.
Similarly, people don't know what to record. That we as musicians will know what part to focus on, what is the gamaka that the guy is doing.
Correct.
But we can do still crowdsource.
Notation is very difficult, but at least if the real performance is recorded,
we can
then you are capturing that as an audio record. And if there is any abhinaya to go along with it is captured. So yes, that is the only way, right? So we are talking about massive volumes of data which can tomorrow be indexed. So first thing is capturing, and then you can keep indexing it. Some new solution that could be found, which we could probably make use of. Okay, brilliant. Now let me go back a little bit. So we are now talking about sort of 2-3 streams here, right? One is the classical Odia music,
Odissi.
which has a Odissi music, which is the which has a, let's say, like your Carnatic and Hindustani, has parallels, has perhaps textual background to it. There are well-defined schools, there are masters, and people are learning on an everyday basis. Because I see that happening in the Carnatic music of the Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra variety. Likewise, you have the Hindustani, which I hear more about it.
Gharanas.
There are Gharanas. How strong is that part of it right now in Odisha?
Odissi music is well researched. There are a lot of practitioners. There is academic teaching and good performing opportunities.
Okay.
Central government is a bit reluctant because they have no proper guidelines to label a music as classical music. Because what has happened is this bifurcation of Carnatic and Hindustani has
Right.
caught on from the days of the All India Radio, where the decision was taken by probably somebody who was not Indian.
Right.
It was established by the British. So
Right.
it's like what do I say? It's a old practice convention that has passed on with no sense in it. So I don't just say this for the state of Odisha. I keep saying it for Assam. There's Borgit of Shankar Deva. It's classical.
Right. Yeah.
And they have their own ragas, talas. Their whole way of putting tala in Satriya and in their Borgit tradition is very different from the rest of India. Pushti Margya Kirtan and all these things have still been researched. Assam is I don't know the amount of research, but I believe like Assam, there are many other regions that more work needs to be done. Odisha is fortunate in that regard because people have been very active right from the 1910s, 20s. They're very active that we are not allowing anybody to encroach.
Okay. Okay.
Nepal, unfortunately, has become Hindustani predominant, and which is good, but which is also bad because it is eaten into the share of traditional Nepali classical music. So that all is fine. But what I am talking of is, for example, you have Tyagaraja's dramas that are performed in the village. You have Yakshagana.
Yeah.
Now, what about those ragas? Is that from the Carnatic repertoire? But it does have a historical link to the Carnatic repertoire, no? And nonetheless, now,
Correct.
is it being accorded the same amount of respect that the proper Carnatic repertoire of Tyagaraja and Dikshitar and Shyama Shastri would? Obviously not.
Yeah.
Obviously not. Those authors are neglected. This is the same thing. I'm just working on the neglected authors in hopes of finding something which is very much. It's like you might find a Venkata Kavi in the villages.
Right.
It's much like that.
Right. No, you are right. I mean, this, what a society values by way of very unfortunate reasons.
Yes.
And where value is accorded and where things are completely neglected, it's a very complex social phenomenon. However, the job of the researcher and people like you, and you have done an admirable work so far, what people like us, when I say us, whatever organizations that we are running with varying funding possibilities, is to bring out things like this and see if there are ways by which we can create a corpus to support activities like yours. Now, interestingly, you are not just looking at this. I mean, you are also recording murals, as you showed.
That's a side hobby.
But that's not your main thing.
No,
but
that is. But the thing is, there's nobody doing it. I can't wait for somebody else to do it. Is the point, because by that time it will be gone. And it has gone in front of my eyes. 3 murals of Puri were whitewashed.
We have seen that in Tamil Nadu particularly. So many murals vandalized, repainted by well-meaning people, but their well-meaning activity is actually disastrous. People pouring money into a temple and then putting tiles everywhere and destroying ancient epigraphic records that are there.
Polishing epigraphs.
Sandblasting, water blasting. It's just, vandalism of all kinds, because we have not sensitized our people. The society has to also take the blame. So back to, the kind of work that you are doing. Now, I understand that there is a certain, at least recognition that is coming here and there for you. At least in terms of naming you or mentioning you or a chief minister seeing you, etc. But now you tell me, what would actually be something, if not in a big order of list of things, that 1 or 2 things that would help you. So we can try to see if such help can be pulled around. What would you like? People from outside, we can only look at some form of support. What are those things that you would like, which will help you?
Funding, very frankly, what you mentioned,
Okay.
I just don't wait for funding because I recognize that this guy will die by the time I am done with this application.
I agree. I'm just saying
that business.
You are doing whatever it is doing, but how we can support? That's
the only thing that's stopping me from going again and again is the travel cost. It's very simple.
Yes.
And the bad thing is I can't see. I don't need a remuneration, but the person I'm dealing with, I need to give him something.
Naturally, you have. I mean, that's a minimum that we should try. Yeah.
They've allowed me to take recordings of them without any charge until now. All the gurus are very cooperative in that, because they are in that bhakti sphere. No, they don't care about these things. They only care that this guy has come 500 kilometers to listen to this raga from me. So they take that very seriously, and they
right.
But that's one thing that becomes essential. Travel is the big thing actually, because in order to be constant back and forth, because this work is only hit and error. You can't expect to go once and get everything. You'll have to revisit the same place 3, 4, 5 times until you're sure that this is nothing. On the 5th attempt, you might strike gold. That also has happened. That's one point. Another is this editing and all. As I was saying, I do it myself. Ideally, somebody else should do it. But the thing is, this again is so specialized that somebody else can't. So I've made up my mind that I have to do this. If at my own snail space, then all right. But I would be happy if I could push the content out when these people were alive. So they would be very happy to see that.
Okay.
That's one thing.
And then I'm sure that it also means large amounts of storage space.
Yes, it does.
On a cloud kind of a storage where
exactly
because whatever disks you have, suddenly something happens.
Has happened.
You crash, you lose. All the efforts will go waste. So there has to be a comprehensive mechanism. I'm taking it seriously. I will discuss with some of my friends. I will come back to you on this particular thing.
Storage, exactly as you said. Google Drive 5 TB is how it has happened. Drives have crashed in the past. I've lost a recording of the last eminent Gotipo Guru who was spearheading the Odissi dance revival movement. An interview in which I held an umbrella in the rain and he did Abhinay under the umbrella. These things have happened. What to do? I've lost that.
Yeah. So let us think about it. We'll look into some of these things, and I'll certainly come back to you with some ideas. So that is one thing, right?
The long-term goal is to just pool all of this information and notate it properly and bring a big volume out in which, of course, I could sing and record. I have that. I can do that always, but it needs to be a book first because you understand the theory, practical thing.
Yes.
It needs to be in both forms. And even in bigger institutions, in the Jagannath Temple of Puri, you ask the songs that were being sung in the 90s, they don't know now.
Okay.
So it's not as if the big institutions have been covered comprehensively because it's too specialized.
Okay. Got it. Now, let's now move to pure folk tribal content, because Odia being what it is, there is perhaps considerable percentage of, if you take Tamil Nadu, the folk tribal part is almost insignificant today in terms of population, where they are there and what they produce. Whereas Odia, there is a considerable mix of the tribal character, right? Now, can you say a few things about how you have gone about at least looking at it from the classical side of things to the folk tribal side of things?
I come from the district of Koraput, which is my home. This is full of tribal. It is one of the densest areas on the whole planet. Largest number of communities. My grandfather was spearheading. He was one of the first people who initiated proper research into these tribes of Odisha, and he has a whole tribal research institute which he leads. He's still doing that work. Unfortunately, our family doesn't come from that background. Our family is this classicalized kind of family from parts of Ganjam, because of that princely state kind of thought process is there, and that is the training. My grandmother has received training in Odissi music. So I have developed a tilt in that. Now, after coming and doing this work on ragas and all, realize see, communication is a big part. There is a reason why I don't go into the tribe, because I can't communicate with them with the ease that I do communicate with the people of South Odisha, the dialect that I'm used to. And in order to be able to comprehend them fully and to make them comfortable so as to expose the aspects of their art in front of me,
Okay.
you need to talk like a friend, you need to talk like somebody local, otherwise they won't tell you. If you talk like somebody very academic, you won't get it, and that is also not the method that is used in today's time. That's a very
Right.
archaic method of being
Right.
academic.
Right. Right.
So I try to capture that thing there. That I'm very clear. Folk I work with.
Okay.
I work with, because folk and classical are together. They're not isolated from the tribal. The tribals are typically very isolated, because they will live on top of some mountain, or they will have their selected communities of villages in a whole area. There's the areas where the tribals interact with the mainstream community. The word tribal has also become objectionable these days. So I should say community, indigenous communities ideally. So the communities, very distinct boundaries, and that's a subject that I've not been deep into. So I'm very clear on not getting there. I have worked on projects on the Bonda language and the Godaba language, the National Geographic project. I worked on that for some period. I've tried to record. That's my limited exposure to them, but I still can't say that I understand them 100% like I do these people, the videos that I showed you.
Right.
I get them 100%, which is why they're willing to expose a huge part of their art in mere 4 or 5 hours.
No, in terms of the subject,
Efficiency.
in terms of the subjects treated by the folk artists, in the classical model, you would see a Rama or a Krishna coming in, right? In the folk model also, is it also
there's a folk Rama? There's a folk Rama. There's a very classical Rama.
Only that, or does it go beyond that? Folk heroes, folk stories, the very theme itself changing.
That is there. There is Dandonato, which is arguably dated to some time. It's pre 7th, 8th centuries in the very least. It has traits of Tantrism, Shaktism, Shaivism, and the tribal religion, because tribal religion is it's very clean on the aspects of nature worship and animal worship, and the themes of violence and erotica. It's very transparent with regards to it's not covered under layers like it is in the classical. And the beauty of Odisha is that you have these, in the words of the Guru Deva Prasad Das, he used to say Tridhara. So here you can see the development of the tribal into the folk, into the classical. And you can even trace from backwards from the classical. I can trace. I've been able to trace from the classical. This raga finds in this folk the simple tune, and then you can go back to that tribal community that is there. That is arguably something you can observe only in a state like Odisha, because all three are there.
That was my next point actually.
The classical
coexist, and one is not gone. Therefore, by just you can correlate and arrive at that. Of how they could have
they've not displaced each other, which is a great thing. It reveals a lot of maturity in the artists of all three genres. The tribals are mature enough not to classicize their art form. That could have happened very easily. It has happened in some beds, but not mostly. The folk people could have been left in the midst of being nowhere, not here, not there, but they have their audience. And it's very interesting to see the same audience is looking at this from a different eye, and that from and the classical ones are. There's a very beautiful example. The Prahalada Nataka that I was mentioning to you. The poets, even the classical poets of Odisha, are so mature because they're interacting with these people on a daily basis. It's part of their life.
Right.
So there's a scene in which Hiranyakashipa gives 16 punishments to kill Prahalada in the whole play. Shodosa Danda. So in that one danda is he calls the local tribal and he tells take him into the forest and kill him. Kill him with poison. Bisadayaka danda. And the Shabara danda is also there. So he calls the Shabara. Now the Shabara will obviously, Hiranyakashipa's language, the royal court language of the 19th centuries, he'll call his Hey Viprachityadi Mantri Pradhana Mane Amho Sabhara Ki Samachara Amho Chamure Gochara Karao. This is the language of Hiranyakashipa. When the Shabara comes, he says, Kai Tahla Babu. which is the local Desia dialect of Odia.
Okay.
And the writer is a classical king, but he's very careful. He's not classicizing the tribal.
Okay.
And Hiranyakashipu says, "Hey, Sabara, Amma Savar." So Hiranyakashipu is using the classical language in front of the tribal.
Right.
The tribal character's literal written dialogue is, "Kaita koilu babu jani parni. I can't understand what you're saying." Then Hiranyakashipu comes down the throne and switches to the local dialect.
Wow. Okay.
So even in the classical, that's why I was saying the beauty of the classical mind appreciating the folk and the folk mind appreciating the classical. Kabi Surja Baladev Ratha, I'll just tell you a segment. The writer of the Champu, which is a big genre in Odissi music. Champu is, there are 34 songs, Gadya Padyamaya. The Odia part has 34 songs according to the 34 consonants. Each consonant song starts, all lines state with the same. So Ma song, all lines will start with Ma. The Ksha song, he writes, Khyamanukampa dharahe, Khira sagara sambhava kucha kumbha jugala parirambha chaturhe. Look at the grandiose language. Khiti chakravala mahabhiti nivarana he, Shruti siro avatangsa kruti sri charana he, Marala viharana, Kararchita charana, Dharabhara harana, Chara chara sarana, Tarabara kirana, Barabara charana, Nakhangsu suragana, Sikhavarana. This is the Sahitya.
Okay.
The music part also is obviously classical, because you look, the mind of a person that is like this in Sahitya, obviously that will reflect in the Sangita. Right. And there's no concept of this poet and this writer, composer. It's one person. There are not two. There's not a separate Vaggaya Karana. India doesn't have the concept of a separate writer and a separate composer until very recent.
Right.
The tune in the Raga Kedara Kamodi and Tripata Talo is Khyamanukampa dhara he, Khira sagara sambhava kucha kumbha jugala pari rambha chatura he, Khyamanukampa dhara he. This is the same person in another song has written about an instrument of tribal origin, the dhumpa. And for the dhumpa, the same poet, Kabi Surja Baladev Ratha, this poet composer, led a revival of the tribal instrument called dhumpa, and he wrote songs for it so the instrument can be revived. And the music used for that is very typical of the tribal communities of Odisha. It's the more civilized, not the primitive tribal ones.
Let's say more refined ones, relatively.
Refined is
everything is a loaded word. When you say primitive, it's a loaded word. So very academically, let's use that word. Yeah.
Primitive, I say from a sense of early in that sense.
Okay.
So the same poet is composing for a tribal instrument.
Right.
Korigoti chanda muhi jai phula korigoti chanda muhi jai phula korigoti chanda muhi korigoti ro tero jani puhai korigoti ro tero jani puhai jai phulo re toru pola bonyo chahi jai phulo toru pola bonyo chahi. So if the same mind is accustomed to both of this,
right.
So if he looks at the phrase Koriga, he'll use this phrase in the classical, no?
Okay.
What is the problem with the phrase? It's a phrase. He'll use it in there.
Okay.
So that is the beauty. You can see the same brain at work here. He's not classicalizing the tribal instrument.
Got it.
It takes the restraint of a great master to not do that. I appreciate that a great deal.
Wonderful. I think you have really, in fact, you singing and then showing the distinction between the classical version and the folk version and the tribal version. It's fantastic. So
the tribal I can't sing. We are not equipped to. It's a very different. It's a very archaic.
Okay, right. So yeah, I understand the very writing itself has to involve that, and it is in the language it is in the rendering, it's in using the appropriate tunes, let's say, instead of calling it raga. That's the sophistication that is packed into that by the creator. It's fantastic, and that is why it has to be really preserved so that future historians and researchers can go into it. Okay, now I would like to sort of wrap it up with a couple of questions, just so that we have a overall round understanding of what is there and what you are trying to do. What is the role of musical instruments in this? Now, you have basically focused a lot on the
vocal music,
writing and vocal. So, from the instrument point of view, where what is the entire range that we are talking about?
Instrument point of view, even the classical instruments are at risk because they've not been properly introduced in the academic courses in the states. And the only instrument that has been accorded due recognition is the mardala, which is the classical percussion instrument of the Odissi music stream.
Okay.
Because, and you have to recognize that these forms, these specific songs, composers, this instrument has got on a pedestal because of the ritual significance of the Jagannath Puri temple in highlighting and preserving it in that ritual sense. So that is obviously more safeguarded because there are more people. This is Mahaprabhu's. This has to stay. But when you go into the ancestor, you go to the great grandfather form of the same instrument, that is at high risk. It's the same. It's the same. You can see the evolution, but nobody is willing. Very few people, even in the folk, very few people of the folk will get out and look at the classical because this is classical. What is our point?
Okay.
That is something that has become very limited. The vision of the people has become very limited. Probably post the English British period.
Okay.
Across India, I think it is the case across India, and we have fallen into this binary trap of folk and this and all that. Of course, there are two extremes that we recognize, but it's still a spectrum. It's not like this is one, that is one, and they have nothing to do with each other.
Okay.
Fortunately, the early music gurus, early 20th century gurus of Odissi music have kept some of these elements in the syllabus itself. So the students have to learn it.
Okay.
Instrument, I am currently working the Veena. Veena, we call Veena.
Okay.
The Mardala a lot of research has been done on the Mardala. The Veena is a classical instrument, but not as well recorded because, of course, my sir is the only person who is the last surviving guru. He has himself seen some 3-4 types of Veenas in his lifetime. And of them, only one is physically surviving. The ones he's seen have gone. So now you have the task of reconstruct the instrument or work with the traditional karigar, the ludier, and go and talk with the person who played the veena inside the Puri temple and ask him what was the construction, what was the playing. Fortunately, the playing technique survives because sir is there. And then there are other aspects of recording a musical tradition also. The language in which they speak. You pull the string like this. What do you call it? You have a typical word for it.
Yeah.
What do you call the bridge on the veena? What do you call the bridge in Odia? What do you call the bridge in the word itself is very important.
Right.
So I kept asking. Then one night, 1 a.m. in the night, he calls me and sir tells me the bridge was called table in Odia. It makes so much of sense, na, table. So that's then you get that colloquial stream of nomenclature that is used on a daily basis by the musicians. Then you have some of these words will trace back to the Shastras. When you look at the Shastric descriptions, Odisha has a lot of music treatises written from the 14th to the 19th, 20th centuries. Lot of 15, 16 treatises.
Okay.
So now the Sanskrit text will tell you in a very different manner how to construct a veena. The major problem being many people have no clue what the words exactly mean. So they'll take the kakubha and place it on the danda. Now what exactly is the kakubha? Some people will say tailpiece, some people will say bridge. Unless you are conversant with the local tradition, you can't make sense of the Shastras. The Shastras also keep asking you to look back into the Prayoga. Unless you know the Prayoga deeply and very well with the vocabulary. Vocabulary is changing very fast in each of our...
Yes.
The rasa that was there in the older expression. And Sahitya, of course, at least in Odisha, you can't isolate the Sahitya from the Sangeeta because these people took the literature part very seriously, unlike North India.
Yeah.
The Gita has
Which-
to, the song is to create rasa. Therefore, everything has to create rasa. The Sahitya has to create rasa. The music has, the tala has to.
which is very much like the South Indian tradition.
Yes.
The
The
Sahityam is
old Indian tradition.
Yeah, yeah, got it. So that the work now is with respect to the instrument, I can see that the work is even more challenging
It is.
because of all the things that you are really talking about.
You have
Right.
lesser people to ask and talk. You have lesser masters in the instrument field all the time. The vocal is always more.
Right, right, and it has built-in complexity. Vocal. If we think vocal itself is difficult, the instrumentation part becomes even more complex and difficult, and therefore urgently in need of also documenting. Right. So with that, I will also.
There are beautiful derivations of these words. There is a gamaka called andolita, which is
Okay.
characteristic of Odissi music, which is sa ni da pa sa ni sa ni sa. If you break it, it is that sa ni da pa ma ga ah. This is ahata. So these things, you have traditional etymologies of this in Odia. So
Okay.
Andolita, my guru's guru, who came from a pura traditional in the village guru tradition. So of course not very influenced by the external. He used to say, "Dolai dolai jibo Andolito."
Okay, what does it mean?
That which goes in a swinging manner is Andolita. So
Okay.
dolaiba is to swing.
Okay.
Similarly, there is a gamaka called Kurula in the Odissi tradition. So Nisa nire sare nisa dhani dasa nisa dhani pada pasa. This is the this nisa nire sare nisa dhani pa. Great Guru Singhari Shyam Sundar Kara, Singhari Shyam Sundar Kara, who was a Sevaita of the Puri Jagannath temple. He used to say this gamaka is like the round eyes of Jagannatha. So people asked why? No, the word Kurula means potter's wheel. As a potter's wheel, when it is turning around like this and it will wobble like that.
Okay. Yes. Precision.
So he says, like a wobbling potter's wheel, this gamaka is like that. Now, where do you get this beautiful poetic etymology?
Right,
This is also going away.
Right.
And Tamil Nadu, I believe a great deal must have been written. Situation
Yeah.
much more dire in places like Odisha and elsewhere.
Correct. But even in Tamil Nadu, the writing,
There must
to
be
what
much more.
extent it captures these kinds of nuances, it's very difficult to say. So I would like to sort of get to that final question. Now the dance performance, again, that goes along with the music. So music for dance, right?
It's different from music for music.
Again, right? That performance again must have its own tradition, its own, it is still that same Shastraic Sangeet only, but it has to bring out the
Dance.
nuances of the dance, the jatis, the performance that the dancer has to highlight, where the Sahitya comes down a little bit and then brings the Nritya part of it so much more, right? There again, you have the slices from the classical to the folk to the tribal. How suddenly we are seeing that.
I'm not equipped to analyze that because I'm very clear. Dance is not my area.
Okay.
But you have less of the rhythmic aspects. The South is where dance is very much obsessed with the rhythmic aspect.
Right.
Odisha's dance is very much obsessed with the bhava aspect. So it is abhinaya, interpretation, where the song you don't have as much of rhythmic exercise as you have swara exercise, because now you have to sing the same line 5 times in different ways. So that is there. But still, singing in dance is very different from singing from music. You can't in dance sing along alap. You can't sing an alap. You can't sing what we call the tenaka.
Okay.
You can't sing the shlokas as you would sing in music. So obviously, there's a great deal of difference. Dance, there needs to be somebody entirely devoted to dance to do this.
Yes.
As Guru Deva Prasad Das was the one who used to do this. Unfortunately, he died very early, but he left his lasting impression on this field. But nobody has carried forward his work after him. he used to do exactly this. He would go into the tribal dances and he would trace that this step has come from that tribal dance into this and then into Odissi.
Okay.
And then to say such things in the 1970s was a big disaster, you know, because that generation, the big problem with some of the classical generation, not so much in Odisha, but generally speaking in India, the big problem is people will tell you this classical traditions have come from Rambha and Menaka and Ha Ha Hu Hu Gandharvas came and taught this. Therefore, we have nothing to do with this lowly tribal music. You encounter this mindset once in a while. And that's
Okay.
the thing that he was exposed. That's the counter protest that he got in the 1970s. Nonetheless, he continued his work. He's written a treatise on that. But
Okay.
nobody to carry forward that work, sadly.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I now get a sense of the challenges that that we all are facing right now. Amazing the kind of work that has to be done, the kind of work which you are clear in the sense that what you are qualified to do, what you cannot do, and therefore our task becomes really difficult to get so many more people to get involved in this larger project of documentation. And the mind boggles at the work to be done, really. So with that,
I can't even cover whole of South Odisha.
Yeah, I understand that. In a sense, I don't want to feel that despair. It is there. It's there at the back.
Just for the volume of the sheer volume of the work.
The sheer volume of it, and that in another sense, we can say, look at the volume that we have produced. Yes, there's a lot that we are losing. There is so much more that we have already lost. Yes. But what a glory that this culture has actually produced. That today I cannot fathom that. I cannot understand the extent of what they have created. But I can sort of sense that there's so much that would have happened. And that itself is, sort of pleasing. Now, the seriousness and the resolve that we must somehow try to get as much as possible saved for posterity.
That sense is what one wishes to instill in just an idea of how big it is.
Right. To the young and old, it is not just the work of one person. It needs a huge community. I hope people who are following this particular talk, and it's, hopefully many more will look at this in the days to come as, we have this whole thing archived. I really hope that they are not just listening to this or looking at you as, hey, here is this nice guy, he's doing a wonderful job, and look at his voice and how well he sings, but actually are suffused with enthusiasm to go and try their own hands at documenting, preserving, and hopefully then that leads to propagating and doing more quality work out of this. For me
if you
personally,
can preserve one more song, it's a big deal.
Exactly.
Who knows that one song might be 15th century song.
Right. So to me, this has been a revelation. I didn't really have an idea about what I was going to get in this talk. That I know I had some idea of what you are doing, but this talk has given me personally, that is as an individual, great idea of what you have been doing, and I really respect you for what you have done. My best wishes to you for doing much more, but more importantly, I will come back to you outside of this, this conversation that we are having, to see in what way I can actually me personally, we as an organization, as Tamil Heritage Trust and our friends, to see how we can support you, how we can help you in getting you do your job better. We'll certainly do that. And thank you for a very serious education session for all of us from Tamil Heritage Trust. Wonderful it was having this great conversation with you, Prateek. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have anything more to say, just your final word. With that, we will end this one.
As I said, one more photograph, one more image.
One more thought. Yes. One
Just
more
one
image.
more could be, just record 1 minute in your life. Even that could be
Right.
something great.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And to all our listeners who are following this, please see in what way you can support this initiative, help, or go and do the exact same thing in your own respective subcultures across India. So whatever you can add to this in your own place, you may be from Rajasthan, you may be from Karnataka, you may be from Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, wherever you are, see if you can replicate what Prateek is doing. If you are from Odisha, see if you can join him. Please get in touch with us and we will connect you to Prateek and see how you can help. Thank you.
Just
thank
one
you all.
bit.
Yes, please.
Just
Please,
one bit. We tend to be very judgmental when we see something of that this is of value or this is not of value. The only thing we shouldn't do that. Just record it and think about it later. Perhaps you'll develop the eye to see that or the ear to hear that sometime later, which now you might not have. Just be ready to accept that something of value might come even of this, which looks valueless. It's only then, therefore, record everything. Even a wandering street minstrel might be having something that is.
Yeah.
That is the whole point of the exercise.
Wonderful. That was fantastic, Prateek. And thank you all the listeners and Prateek. Thank you from Tamil Heritage Trust, and we will be there again next month with another talk. This was wonderful. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Bye from all of us.